In today's video, we have lots to talk about. It's been a very interesting day of NHL news. Today's video focusing a lot on the Edmonton Oilers. Could they possibly look at doing a revenge offer sheet to St. Louis next offseason? Plus, we're going to quickly talk about the trade made tonight between the Oilers and the Vancouver Canucks. Also going to take a look at another potential trade, or a couple of them that could involve the Oilers as well. Could they target Battle of Alberta rival Rasmus Andersson? Could Brett Kulak end up in Montreal again? Plus, we also have an interesting quote from Jeremy Swayman to analyze that restricted free agent situation with the Bruins. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, tonight's video is very much focused around the Edmonton Oilers, a lot having to do with the offer sheets that are pending. We had a trade tonight involving Edmonton and Vancouver, just a lot of things kind of going on here. Of course, we know the Oilers are down to their final 2 days before they have to announce their decision on the offer sheets with the St. Louis Blues. Lots of questions that are pending. We don't have the answers, but lots of people speculating what those answers are, but we will get the absolute, decision here soon enough. But of course, if the Oilers do want to match those offer sheets, they're going to have to figure out a way to create some cap space. So for starters, let's start with a quick trade update. In case you missed it earlier, there is a video on the channel already talking about a little bit more in depth, but the Oilers did complete a trade with division rival Vancouver, picking up Vasily Podkolzin from the Canucks for a 2025 fourth round pick. That pick was originally a pick that belonged to the Ottawa Senators. That Senators pick actually went to the Edmonton Oilers in that trade that they made involving Xavier Bourgault, Robbie Harventi, etc. earlier this offseason. So now they essentially flipped that pick for Podkolzin. So essentially now Xavier Bourgault, Jake Chiasson out, Robbie Harventi, Vasily Podkolzin in. So really overall for Edmonton, I think they've done relatively well here. The question though around Podkolzin, given the fact he's a former first round pick, 2019, 10th overall, definitely drafted way higher than he should have been. I know raised a lot of eyebrows when that pick was announced. Had a 26-point rookie campaign. The last couple of years, we've kind of shown some regression. Difficult finding a regular spot for him. He only appeared in 19 games last year, while playing mostly in the American Hockey League. His AHL time the past 2 years has been relatively productive, though, and there's still a lot of hope that the 23-year-old will find more of his game. I mean, he's not afraid to play a hard style of game, forechecks, skates well. I'm not sure that he's ever going to be a real high-end offensive winger, but certainly somebody that can fight for a spot here. I mean, look, so I mentioned a few times recently with Vancouver that he could be a player that could be moved because I didn't really see a spot for him in the lineup. Obviously in Edmonton, it's going to be tough to see where he might fit, especially if they do match on Dylan Holloway. But could he possibly be somebody that they have in mind here to maybe play the role that Holloway did for them at a much cheaper rate? Because the contract offer that they're pending here for the St. Louis Blues offer sheet is more than double the money that Podkolzin's making. He signed for this year and next at $1 million a season. So we have to wait and see the outcome of that. But essentially, that's what a lot of people are making of this, is that this is likely going to be connected, and we'll see how this works out. Lots of talk, too, is could the Oilers target St. Louis as a revenge offer sheet next offseason? Because the St. Louis Blues do have one of their top young players in Jake Neighbours, a pending restricted free agent that could find himself in a similar situation. Of course, right now the Blues have a decent amount of cap space, which is why they're able to do these offer sheets. If they are accepted and they get to keep those players, though, they are going to be a lot tighter to the cap. Obviously, they have some things happening, contracts expiring, the cap's going up. They're not going to be completely tight for next offseason, and they could very well get Neighbours signed ahead of time. But Jake Neighbours is one of those players that is an emerging young player who's been getting a lot better. His role is definitely going to be bigger with the Blues this year, and he's got connections to Alberta and Edmonton specifically. I mean, he is an Alberta boy, born in Airdrie, played his junior hockey in the Edmonton Oil Kings organization. Lots of familiarity there. I would have no doubt that the Oilers would love and have the interest in this player. However, I do think that it's far from a guarantee that they attempt this revenge offer sheet next year for a couple of reasons. One, I don't know that they're going to have the cap space to be able to offer a whole heck of a lot. based on their cap situation now, which is why they're being targeted. Obviously, they don't have a lot of room. So there is that. Now, not to say that they couldn't make other cost-cutting moves, plus the cap will go up, etc. next year. So there's lots of other things that can factor in here. But you're going to have a Leon Draisaitl extension hopefully work out. So he's going to be making more money. It's going to be really hard. Because if they don't, as we've seen here on these offer sheets, like with these ones, they're big-time overpayments. And if you don't go way above what the player's worth, the team's probably going to match. And unless they want to pay big money for Neighbours, which I don't think they could really do, St. Louis likely would not have a difficult time matching. So as much as it's anything is possible, I'm sure that maybe considering the type of player Neighbours is and the connections to Alberta, that maybe Edmonton's got that in the back of their mind. But I don't think it's going to be easy for them to do, and it's far from a guarantee that they actually do that revenge tactic next offseason. And if I'm St. Louis, I don't want to even get to the point where that's even an option. I want to make sure that my guys are looked after. So if I'm Doug Armstrong and Alex Steen there, I would be getting to work on getting our own players looked after to make sure that you're not leaving yourself vulnerable for a revenge attack, though. It's just that simple, because it does happen. Teams do hold grudges, and it could happen. But I don't know that the Oilers are going to be well positioned to do so. But like I said, you can't take anything for granted just yet. It's early. So there's all that. So revenge offer sheet has been a hot topic. The Podkolzin trades making people think that they're not going to match on Holloway. The Broberg contract is the one that most people seem to think won't be matched just because it's so much money. A lot of people are starting to wonder now tonight if they're going to walk from both players. And it would not be shocking to me if that were the case. But, like I said, they still have time. They still have... It was Tuesday this past week that the offer sheets were signed. They could still make another move tomorrow, for example, and create some space. So what kind of things could they do? Well, I've seen some talk from the Montreal perspective. We've seen them be linked to Cody Ceci. Well, of course, Brett Kulak is the other defenseman that's been offered, or not really offered, but like been speculated a lot. It could be moved to create some space to be able to match at least one of these contracts. Well, Brett Kulak, of course, formerly of Montreal. We know the Habs have some cap space. They can weaponize that. I've seen one suggestion from an article, which I can link down below in the comments as well if you want to have a look at it. Essentially, the Oilers writer, or the Habs writer, suggests that Ken Hughes reacquire Brett Kulak. Of course, he's the one who traded him to Edmonton. And, of course, part of that trade they got back was a second-round pick, which they used to draft Lane Hudson. So they've already done really well in one Brett Kulak trade. Why not push your luck and go for another one? They might be able to get him for nothing, future considerations. Plus, you're probably going to be able to talk Edmonton into giving you some sort of a sweetener, right? So that's the intent here, is use your space, get something extra for free, whether that be, a decent draft pick, maybe it's a prospect in their system that they like, something extra, and then do like you did with Jeff Petrie, because they reacquired Jeff Petrie, but he didn't stay. He got flipped again, right? So they could do the same sort of thing, and then maybe trade Kulak to another team and get another asset. So there is that scenario that's been floated out there. It's like, you know what? I can totally see Ken Hughes doing that. I mean, Kulak may not even stay, right? So like maybe they retain a little bit of money. Maybe they don't. I don't know. I'm not even sure right now, Montreal, what their situation is with retention spots. I'd have to look it up. But, at the same time here, like, that would not be shocking. To me, that would make more sense for them than trading Cody Ceci. I've also seen some reports, and I can't verify 100%, but some people are saying that Cody Ceci is very close with Leon Draisaitl, and Leon's gone to bat for him with management, making sure that they don't trade him. I don't know if that's true, but I've seen people saying that on social media as well. Although Leon Draisaitl is not the general manager, neither is Connor McDavid, and I'm sure to some degree they value their opinion, but I don't think players are going to be traded or not traded or signed or not signed just based on friendships. That to me sounds a little bit crazy, but yeah, at the end of the day, that is what it is. So Kulak to Montreal, could Ken Hughes pull that off and get even more assets out of Kulak like he did with Jeff Petrie? That's not a completely out of the question type of move. I know according to Bob Stauffer, I know one of the suggestions that he has made, which actually I intended on talking about this in yesterday's video last night, but we actually had lots of other things to throw in there, so I don't want to make it too long. But he had suggested that if they do make some moves and they move a defenseman, or even if they don't, assuming they lose Broberg, which is likely at this point, that they make a deal with provincial rival Calgary and go after Rasmus Andersson to be that second pair right shot defenseman. Andersson comes with a contract of $4.5 million for 2 more years. Maybe they offer them either CC or Kulak, one of them, and they're going to probably have to give up a first-round pick, maybe a prospect, some type of deal like that. Obviously, the Flames are not in a situation where they really need to move Andersson. We've talked before that the Flames, I think, right now are content to go into the year with what they have. They do have some veterans. I don't think they're opposed to, completely, lost on the idea that maybe trading Kadri or Andersson, but I don't really think they feel like they need to either, unless the deal completely blows them away and they feel like they have to take it because they'd be crazy not to. That's the only way you're going to see a deal involving Calgary and one of their veteran players. But Rasmus Andersson, like I've said before, I've mentioned his name a few times in the last few weeks. From what we've heard, it certainly sounds like he's a player that's generating a lot of interest because he has a really good contract. He can play top 4 minutes. He's pretty good at both ends of the ice. He's a pretty valuable commodity. And obviously, everybody knows Calgary has been going through a lot of changes and rebuilding that team. So they're bound to get lots of calls and lots of interest on him, which I believe has definitely been the case. I just, like I said, don't think they've really had an offer that's been what they would call amazing that they have to keep or take to move on. So could Edmonton talk to Calgary about a trade? It's possible. I wouldn't completely rule it out. But what we've also seen with Craig Conroy and his other moves, I would think he'd probably make the Oilers pay through the nose. And I don't know that they're going to be able to do that. So as much as it's a great idea, I don't know that they're going to pull it off. I mean, obviously it's an option. We'll see. It makes a lot of sense for Edmonton. I just don't know if it makes a ton of sense for Calgary's point of view. So could Rasmus Andersson end up in Edmonton? Could they move Kulak back to Montreal? Montreal kind of fleeced them for extra assets because of their situation so they can match the offer sheets. All of it is theoretically possible. It just seems a lot of it being unlikely. At this point, I'm kind of the opinion that I just don't know that Edmonton's going to match either offer sheet. I'm not really sure or confident that they will. And still, I think Broberg is the more likely one to go. They could theoretically keep Podkolzin and Holloway both on the roster with Evander Kane going a long-term injury reserve. So I don't think it's a given that Holloway is not matched. I mean, Podkolzin could be coming in just as an opportunity to get a former first-round pick, decent young player at a cheap cost. But maybe it's not. I mean, when it comes to Broberg and Holloway, I would not be shocked if they walk from both players. But at this point, I think it's possible Holloway stays. I'm still not convinced Broberg's going to. But unless we see another trade from Edmonton in the next 24 hours, it's just not going to be feasible for them to keep both players. So tomorrow will be a very telling day. There's also been some reports from Edmonton media saying they think the Edmonton Oilers are going to announce the decision here on the offer sheets sometime on Monday afternoon. But if I'm not mistaken, I do believe they theoretically have until Tuesday, I think would be the actual cutoff, because they have 7 days, and it was announced on Tuesday. So, I mean, although with the time of day everything came out, it was early that day, they probably have, in theory, want to make their decisions and have everything announced by Monday evening would be my guess. So tomorrow could be a very interesting day for Edmonton. We should find out one way or another. We're either probably going to see a trade or an announcement that at least one of the offer sheets not being matched, and we'll have a little bit more clarity on the whole situation. Now, one other thing I found interesting today was a quote from Jeremy Swayman in a recent interview he did, looking at the fact that he does not have a contract and he's still unsigned with the Boston Bruins. And up until this point, Boston media, most of the fans, I mean, some fans have been kind of nervous about this. I've seen chatter online, he's not signed. Should we be worried? We've already traded Allmark. Now he's, this is really dragging on. Clearly they don't want to pay him what he's worth. Starting to go into panic mode because we're, getting closer and closer to training camp. Like I said before, in my opinion, it's still too early to panic. there's no pressure point at this time of the offseason, right? Like sometimes you have a pressure point of whether or not you're going to arbitration, so they kind of pushes things along. And then if you have an arbitration date, you want to get it figured out before that date. Well, they didn't do that. So now the only time you're really going to have another pressure point is when training camp starts. Obviously, they don't want him to miss camp because then he's going to possibly be delayed in being ready for the season. If you miss training camp, it's hard to jump right in later. So not a great idea, right? So at the end of the day, that's a pressure point. But if that pressure point comes and goes and there's no deal, the next pressure point is going to be night one of the regular season when the Bruins play their first game. Is he going to be signed or not? So it kind of, puts a little pressure into the mix to get things done. We're nowhere near that here yet, but Swayman's quote was interesting. It just says that it's unfortunate at times, but I know that I'm going to be playing hockey at the end of the day, and I really hope it's with the Boston Bruins. So that quote, I think I've seen some people commenting on it going, what does that mean? Is Swayman think he's going to be offer sheeted and that maybe he'll sign somewhere else and put the Bruins in a bind and maybe they'll have to match like we've seen in Edmonton? Or is this a situation where, if he's not signed, are they going to be forced to trade him? It's at this point, you can't really put words in his mouth. You can't try to say that it means something else. At the end of the day, I really just think it means that he hopes that he and the Bruins get it figured out. I don't think Jeremy Swayman has any desire to really want to leave, but I do think it's fair to say that after how his last contract went and how everything's gone, that he wants to be paid appropriately. There's no doubt. And, I think he, at this point, has to have at least a small bit of reservation that it's going to work out. But, we have every reason to think that Jeremy Swayman is committed to being a Bruin. He's committed to the area. He loves being in Boston. So I'd be shocked if anything really come about to lead to a change in the relationship where he's moved. But you can't completely rule out an offer sheet. I guess at this point, I never would have said that before. But what we've seen out of St. Louis, the only problem is looking around. Who would do it? Because to be honest, I don't think you're going to have any chance of being successful on an offer sheet with Jeremy Swayman unless you're going top dollar. And if you're going to go, top dollar, is somebody going to offer a whole bunch of, want to give up multiple first round picks? I don't know, right? Are they going to have to offer $9 or $10 million on this guy? And as much as he might be worth that, and goalie contracts definitely come with a lot of risk. We've seen Bobrovsky, we've seen Price. They both at times looked really good, and at times they did not, right? So it's such a unique position and difficult to really figure out goalie contracts that I don't know. But yeah, it's unfortunate, like he said, that he's not signed. I'm sure it's causing some fans to be concerned. I just think unless something goes astray here that we don't see coming, I don't think we have any reason to panic just yet. It's too early. There's no pressure point. If training camp opens and he's not unsigned, then at that point, I would be a little bit more concerned. But we have a ways to go yet, so we'll see. But there really hasn't been a ton of information coming out, leaking out of Boston as to where things stand either. So we don't really have much to go on. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But let me know your thoughts on Swayman and all the Oilers stuff in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.